Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 16 recap. But before we jump into those games, just a few tidbits of news here, starting with a very sad injury, personally, of course. We have TJ Hawkinson, who will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL and MCL. That bad of an injury probably kind of lingers into training camp in the season next year. Maybe not this season, but definitely into the off-season activities. So real bummer there, having that bad of an injury this late, but it happens, sadly, part of the NFL, injuries like that. And then a few pickups for veterans. The 49ers pick up defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day off of the free agency market, and the Texans pick up veteran safety Kareem Jackson also off the free agency market. So now that we have those news out of the way, jumping into the games, starting with the aforementioned Vikings, we had the Detroit Lions going to Minneapolis in an NFC North showdown, and the Lions just eking out a win by a score of 30-24. Throughout the course of this game, before halftime, the Vikings, of course, lost TJ Hawkinson, as I mentioned. Just after halftime, Jordan Addison went out with an injury and did not return. And I believe we lost a defender. I'm kind of blanking on it now.
DJ Wanham.
Correct. DJ Wanham went out with an injury through this game. And we were negative in the turnover differential. I believe it was only 2-1, maybe 2-0. 2-1 because Jahmyr Gibbs had a fumble, which isn't terrible, but you're still negative in the turnover differential, and you're missing all of those starters, borderline star-studded players, and you only lose by 6 against one of the better teams in the NFL, at least in the AFC or in the NFC right now. I'll take that. I kind of like how we played. Mullins had 2 more just dumb interceptions. If he can just cut down on the interceptions, that's all we need. We finally locked everything up on the fumble front, and then now we just throw these stupid interceptions, whether it's Dobbs, whether it's Mullins. Jaren Hall didn't really get too much of a look, but the little bit that we've got to see of him has been interception free, which is nice, but still by no means great offensive football. So we're in a bad situation right now. I don't know how we're going to pull ourselves out of it. We are still in the playoff race technically, but not in a good position. I believe we would have to win against Green Bay this week and against the Lions in week 18 to really give us any sort of a real chance. So I'm not loving it, especially now that TJ Hawkinson and possibly Jordan Addison and DJ Wanham won't be a part of the team for those couple of games. Keep fighting, I guess, but definitely not very confident in the Minnesota Vikings right now.
Yeah, this was a pretty convincing win, I thought, for the Detroit Lions. They were able to run all over you guys with a couple of touchdowns to Jahmyr Gibbs and a touchdown to David Montgomery. Not much was done by Goff, who just had over 200 passing yards and only 1 touchdown. This was definitely a game won by the Detroit running game. With that being a weakness now of the Minnesota Vikings, it seems that will be very, very interesting going forward. And if not for those interceptions by Mullins, I think this would have been a lot closer and maybe even a victory for the Vikings. But because of that, the Detroit Lions won the NFC North with this win, and so they are the first time that the Detroit Lions have won the NFC North since 1993, when it was the NFC Central still, and they had Barry Sanders running for them. So. That playoff run ended in a wild card game for them. We'll have to see if they can go further this time, but a very similar team built around the running game for the Detroit Lions, and another tough loss for the Minnesota Vikings.
Have they ever gone past the wild card, the Lions?
Yes, they have. They did win one wild card game against the Dallas Cowboys in 91.
Oof, that is rough. You know what? They can have this win. After hearing that history, I feel less bad for the Vikings. I'll stop complaining right there. Now moving on to another NFC North team, we have the Green Bay Packers heading to Carolina to take on the Panthers and really just eke out a win by a score of 33-30 Green Bay.
Yeah, this ended up being a lot closer than it looked, or a lot how am I trying to
Closer than it should have been.
Closer than it should have been.
That's really what it
That's
was.
what I'm trying to say. Because going into the fourth quarter, we were up by 14 points, and we went into that prevent defense that prevents you from winning, and it almost came back and bit us again, with the Carolina Panthers scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to bring it to a tie game, which led to Anders Carlson kicking his first ever career game-winning field goal to put the Packers ahead with just under a minute left, where the Panthers were able to drive downfield and get to field goal position, but they were out of timeouts and ran out of time with the spike costing them the last second of the game clock. So a very eked by win for the Green Bay Packers. It probably should have went into overtime. It was a really close call on that spike, but you just saw that 1 second click away, and it takes about a half a second for that spike to really hit the ground and you to do the spike motion. So it was just close enough for the Packers to sneak by and keep us in the playoff race, where this Sunday's matchup against the Vikings basically becomes an elimination game.
Yep.
So
100%.
that'll be fun to see. But hats off to the Panthers, who had one of their best career or best offensive games of this year, with 2 touchdowns from Bryce Young, 2 passing touchdowns from Bryce Young, and a touchdown by Chuba Hubbard. It was really kind of a shootout kind of game, a high-scoring game. It was exciting to watch, and I was just excited the Packers were able to pull out a victory in the end.
Yeah, they say football is a game of inches, and it is definitely a game of milliseconds as well. Because, like you said, that spike was so close. I think they made the right call. I completely agree that it didn't get off in time, but man, was it close to going into overtime there. There was a really weird really weird series of events. That's what I'm looking for. Not too long before that spike came so close, where the Panthers actually went down and scored to, I believe it was the touchdown before they tied it up, and they went for 2 points, got it, and then it got brought back by a holding call, so the 2 points didn't count, and then they ended up missing that ensuing field goal. And of course, in a 3-point game, that, or I guess it would only technically be a 2-point swing right there, because if they would have gotten the 2-point conversion, 2-point swing in a 3-point game doesn't really matter. But when you don't get that and already are morally beat up and then go out and miss that field goal, you got to imagine that kind of messed with their psyche a little bit. So in an alternate universe, it'd be interesting to see what would have happened if they actually had gotten that and if they would have been able to come back and win. But nonetheless, a really good game all around and a good game by the Packers to pull out a win and keep themselves alive for now.
I think if we had lost that one, we might have cut LaFleur and Barry and
at least Barry.
I think the whole coaching staff might have changed over there.
I think maybe LaFleur survives, but I think Joe Barry is definitely gone if you lose.
He's
that
gone
game.
after this season anyway. There's no way they retain him. It's just not working.
No, not at all. So now moving on to my game of the week, I have the Thursday night football game with the New Orleans Saints heading to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, and the Rams picking up a win at home by the score of 30-22. Now, this game was very cut and dry for a while, just as the Packers game was. I want to say the Rams also went to the fourth quarter with about a 14-point lead, and then the Saints were able to drop 15 points in that same fourth quarter, really tightening it up on the Rams there. And they didn't get the fun end of the game, last-second spike off, but they did end up losing, as I mentioned. But I really picked this game as my game of the week because it opened my eyes up to the Rams. The Rams are a very good team. They went through a lot of injury troubles with Cooper Kupp missing the first 4 games and Puka Nacua really still coming into his shell because he was a breakout star from week 1. But, you know, he still has developed so much since week 1, just getting better and better each and every week. Stafford came in a little injured. They didn't know what they were doing at running back necessarily at the beginning of the season before they traded Cam Akers. There's just a lot going on that wasn't adding up in Los Angeles, but now they have it together. They got Kieran Williams, who's becoming a star. They have both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua out there. Matthew Stafford is back up to his 100% form. That defense, ironically, which usually kind of carried them, has been slacking lately outside of Aaron Donald just being Aaron Donald. But nonetheless, it's been cool to see this Rams team develop and just get better each and every week. And I think that they are not only a shoo-in for the playoffs right now, I think they go in and go on the road somewhere and pick up an upset win in the wild card. That's just my prediction, but what I've seen from this Rams team has been really good stuff.
Yeah, the Rams played very well on Thursday night. The Saints tried to make it a comeback, but they just fell short. And when you get 100% Stafford on a roll, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league when he's right. And so he's showing that he still has it. One interesting aspect of this turnout could be that if the Rams do make the playoffs, it could be the Los Angeles Rams at the Detroit Lions, where it would be a Goff versus Stafford playoff game. And then we all know that's who they traded for each other back in 2020 before the Rams Super Bowl run. So that will be interesting to see if that's the game that it turns out to be. That's what I hope for if the Rams do make the playoffs. I kind of need the Rams to lose more games for the Packers' sake.
Yeah.
The Vikings are in a better situation than the Packers right now, at least. But I digress. When I'm talking about the Saints here, they had a couple of big touchdown catches from Chris Olave and I believe Rashid Shaheed, who continues to be a big play threat for them. And if not for just a couple of late turnovers by the Saints, I believe the Saints pull out this game and beat the Rams. But they weren't able to pull the comeback, and the Rams were able to walk away with a securing victory.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the first Thursday night games this year that I was really like, wow, that was a good game.
Yeah.
Because usually it's just like
a good game.
Usually it's just like that wasn't even worth watching by the time you're done with it.
Yeah, that fourth quarter became very exciting.
It was fun. And then finally we have an AFC West matchup to finish it off with Callan's game of the week, with the Las Vegas Raiders heading to Kansas City to take on division rival Chiefs and picking up a win on the road by a score of 20-14.
Yep, and this will be the Raiders' first win against the Chiefs in 7 attempts. So the Patrick Mahomes dominance era is starting to come to an end early with losses to the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders this year. So that Chiefs offense has just not been able to click. It is just not in sync. They continue to have stupid penalties like offensive offsides, huge drops, including a drop by Travis Kelce that would have set up a first down on a possible touchdown changing drive. And really this game changed in the second quarter when two defensive plays by the Las Vegas Raiders was the result of 2 touchdowns in 7 seconds, when a fumble recovery was returned for a touchdown, followed by a pick six by Patrick Mahomes of Jack Jones, who had his second defensive touchdown in as many weeks after a defensive touchdown in that Chargers blowout. And also it is the first time that the Raiders have had multiple defensive touchdowns in consecutive games. So that's interesting for them. But really a solid win by the Raiders, who would continue to shut down that Chiefs offense and show that maybe the Chiefs aren't as dominant as they once were.
Yeah, because not to mention, I mean, both of those touchdowns are very arguably, of course, the pick six, very arguably, but it was the fumble as well. You could easily say were Mahomes' fault.
Mm-hmm.
And there was at least 2 that I witnessed, if not probably a third time that Mahomes really should have thrown an interception, and it was just dropped by the defensive player, or maybe the wide receiver had to come back and become the corner and make sure that it didn't get intercepted. So just kind of a sloppy game by the team overall, but especially by Mahomes. Of course, everyone was kind of giving him the crap after that Bills game when he was acting like a baby. And then I thought he was going to come back out and kind of be like, I'm a baby, watch this, and just absolutely tear apart the Raiders. But instead, he puts up another very sloppy performance. Yeah. I don't want to say that their run of dominance is over, because they've shown very many times that they can have some bad games but still be able to turn it around and through injury or controversy or whatever go ahead and still win a Super Bowl. But it's definitely starting to look like it more these few games and this year than it has in the prior years.
Mm-hmm. And the Raiders can actually win the division still if they win out and the Chiefs lose out.
Interesting.
So it's not a sealed deal that the Chiefs make the playoffs yet.
Vegas holding on to some hope. So that was our NFL Week 16 recap. Thank you all so much for watching, and make sure you stay tuned in until tomorrow for our Week 17 predictions. But until then, don't forget
To eat the W.